Now, I know this sounds kind of sketchy at first, but coffee can potentially contribute to insulin resistance. It's kind of wild why this works, and I'll keep this short. Essentially, coffee is going to have caffeine, which is going to stimulate this fight or flight response, right? This epinephrine, norepinephrine response. Well, that does a couple of things. For one, elevates cortisol, which can kind of impact our blood glucose and how it circulates. But additionally, our stored glycogen sometimes gets liberated really, really fast. Our stored carbohydrates in our muscle gets liberated very fast when you have a bolus of caffeine. Now, that being said, caffeine is also good for us in a lot of ways as far as fatty acid utilization and fat mobilization is concerned. So don't go throwing away all your coffee just yet. But here's what's wild. Decaf coffee actually has humongous benefits when it comes down to insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. This is pretty wild. Now, we do have to look at rodent model studies here to really understand mechanisms. So don't hate me for referencing rodent models instead of a human model here, but it helps us understand mechanisms. Okay, so the spike you see when you have coffee in the morning is usually because of the caffeine. If you were to switch that to decaf, you might not see that same glucose spike. So there's a study published in the British Journal of Nutrition. It took a look at mice in this particular case, and they took a look at specific coffee polyphenols. So they extracted the polyphenols out of coffee and they gave them to mice in a pretty high dose, 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So they gave them these coffee polyphenols, and then right after that, they gave them a sugar and starch bolus. So basically they gave them a fair bit of carbohydrates. Wild effects. The mice that ended up having the coffee polyphenols had significantly lower levels of glucose, but they also had significantly lower levels of insulin. If it had only lowered glucose, this would be a different discussion. But the fact that it lowered insulin too tells us that it sort of helped the pancreas produce the right amount of insulin. We don't want the pancreas to produce so much insulin for just a little bit of glucose. Now, another thing they noticed is that there was a decrease in what is called insulinotropic peptides or polypeptides. These are precursors to insulin release. And when you see a decrease in that, that means that the signal that it was actually sending to the pancreas itself was less. So it was starting at a very early pre-programmed level, which is fascinating stuff. Okay. Now there was another piece that we need to look at. I'm going to come back to some of the data from this study in just a second, but I have to jump to another study so we understand another potential mechanism here. This study was published in the Impact Journal of Aging, and this took a look at subjects that consumed decaf coffee, and they found that both decaf and regular coffee ended up decreasing liver mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. What we do particularly know from other research is that spiking liver mTOR is associated with lesser insulin sensitivity and more insulin resistance. So by decreasing liver mTOR and by increasing liver ATP and increasing basically the fats that are used by a cell, we are ultimately improving our insulin sensitivity. It's fascinating stuff. So you can have the coffee and get the polyphenols out of it. And I want to talk about mechanisms here in just a second. I've been drinking LMNT for 7 years. Not just as a traditional electrolyte, but as something that curbs my appetite through the course of the day. So that link down below gets you a free sample variety pack. When you get any purchase with LMNT, you get that free variety pack. So you can try all the different flavors. They've got a sparkling as well, which is something that's really been a game changer for me because it feels like I'm drinking a soda, but without the sugar, without the carbs, without the nonsense, without the hidden nasty stuff, just straight up electrolytes in a sparkling can. But I still love their stick packs. Their stick packs are what get me through a lot of my workouts. It makes life easier for me. I'm not thinking about food all the time because I have something that I can sip on that curbs my appetite and is also mineralizing my body. So that link down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas, is for that free sample variety pack with any purchase. So what we do know about how decaf coffee works with this is it suppresses what are called lipogenic enzymes. Okay, we're talking specific things like fatty acid synthase. Now, this is very good for fat accumulation, right? We know that if we reduce fatty acid synthase is what synthesizes new fat, synthesizes new triglycerides from fatty acids that we consume. So if we reduce that, we ultimately are storing less fat. That is very, very, very good. Okay, we also have a reduction in malonyl coenzyme A, which plays a role as sort of a precursor prior to fatty acid synthase coming in. Now, you're looking at me saying okay, this is great, but what does this have to do with glucose? What does this have to do with insulin? Well, quite a bit actually, because this is all facilitated by something called SREB1C. Okay, going over everybody's heads here. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of letters, what the heck. By downregulating SREB1C, we are actually downregulating not only fat utilization, but also potentially glucose uptake as well. Well, we're increasing glucose uptake, but we're sort of decreasing the demand for glucose, if you will. And that's simply because SREB1 is activated not just by fat, but it's activated by glucose. So when we look at this data and we see how SREB1 is downregulated from decaf coffee, we already know from other studies that that affects fat, but now we understand that it's affecting glucose as well. So the whole piece of this puzzle is that polyphenols that we should be getting from food, but the reality is that most of us don't get polyphenols from our food because we're not eating foods rich in antioxidants and polyphenols. Well, we're getting it from our coffee. And whether it's decaf or not, we still get that benefit. What's funny is that on average, 47% of our daily antioxidant and polyphenol intake is actually coming from our morning cup of coffee. That was actually from a study published in the journal Nutritional Science. It's pretty wild. Okay, they found that 79% of our antioxidants that we get in a day are coming from beverages to begin with, but 47% are coming from our single dose of coffee in the morning. So when it comes down to insulin sensitivity and trying to help out our cells to utilize glucose better and pump out less insulin, coffee could be helping us. But unfortunately, the caffeine in the coffee seems to counteract a little bit of the polyphenol effect. So my advice to you is have the cup of coffee, but then after that, counteract that with more decaf throughout the day, or switch to decaf, half calf sort of thing. So that way you're kind of having a mix with a little less caffeine, but a higher ratio of polyphenols to caffeine content. And better yet, alongside the decaf, you can still have something like a red juice or a green juice to kind of pump the antioxidants in, since we're not getting it from our food, evidently. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.